My brother-in-law walked me down the aisle. Not my father, not my uncle. My brother-in-law, who had known me for 4 years, who still called me Hey sometimes because he got nervous and forgot my name. He was the one who straightened his tie 3 times in the hallway outside the venue, looked at me and said, "You look beautiful. Your dad's an idiot." And then he offered me his arm like it was the most natural thing in the world. My parents were 2 states away. They had been there the week before. I need to back up. I grew up in Omaha, middle child technically. I have an older brother who moved to Seattle right after college and kind of checked out of the family orbit, and a younger sister named Tess. Tess and I are 3 years apart. You'd think that would mean we had similar childhoods, similar treatment, similar memories of holidays and birthdays, and the way our parents handled things. We didn't. I don't know exactly when I realized it. Maybe around 12, when Tess got a birthday party with 20 kids in a rented space at a local gymnastics center. And my birthday that year was a cake from the grocery store and a card my mom had clearly grabbed on the way home from work. I told myself it didn't matter. Kids do that. They talk themselves out of things that hurt, because the alternative is sitting with it, and sitting with it at 12 is unbearable. My parents weren't cruel. That's the thing that made it so hard to explain to anyone. They weren't mean to me. They just loved her more. Visibly. Openly. In ways I don't think they even noticed, or if they noticed, they didn't think I could see. My dad used to call Tess his sunshine. He called me kiddo. I know that sounds small. It is small. But when it's every day for 18 years, small adds up. I left for college in Columbus on a combination of loans, a partial academic scholarship, and a work-study job in the campus library. My parents contributed nothing, not $1. They said they didn't have it. 2 years later, Tess enrolled at the University of Nebraska, in-state, 40 minutes from home, and my parents paid her full tuition for all 4 years. They also bought her a used car so she could commute. I found out about the car when I came home for Thanksgiving, and it was sitting in the driveway. No one had mentioned it. My mom said, "Oh, we figured it made more sense since she's local." I nodded and passed the green beans. I graduated with close to $38,000 in student loans. I got a job in Columbus at a mid-size accounting firm, found an apartment with 2 roommates, and started paying down debt on a $46,000 salary. I did not ask my parents for help. They did not offer. 6 months into that first job, my mom called and said they were having a rough couple of months and asked if I could help out. "Nothing big," she said. "Just a few hundred, temporarily." I said yes. Of course I said yes. She was my mother. $250 a month, starting the next week. I set up an automatic transfer, and I didn't think about it too hard because thinking about it too hard would have led me somewhere I wasn't ready to go. I sent that transfer every single month for almost 4 years. The few times I asked if things had gotten more stable and whether they still needed it, my dad would say something vague about the economy or his back, and my mom would change the subject. I kept sending it. I met my husband at a work conference in Cincinnati when I was 28. His name's Owen. He is the steadiest, most grounded person I've ever met in my life, which is saying something because his family is the opposite of mine in every possible way. They are loud and warm and relentlessly involved in each other's lives in ways that took some getting used to. His parents, Greta and Dawn, welcomed me into family dinners and group chats, and all of it within about 6 months of us dating. It was disorienting. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. It never did. Owen and I got engaged in November. We planned a June wedding in Columbus, where we both lived and had built our lives. Small ceremony, about 60 guests, venue outside of the city, nothing extravagant. Owen's parents were involved from the beginning. His mom came with us to look at venues. His dad helped us negotiate the catering contract because he'd run a small restaurant for 20 years and knew the language. My parents were invited to be involved. My mom said she was too busy, and then asked if we could do the wedding in Omaha instead. We couldn't. We had jobs, a community, and a deposit already down. She said okay. She didn't ask about the venue again. Save the Dates went out in January. I called my parents when I sent theirs. My dad said June is a good month. My mom asked if Tess could be a bridesmaid. I said I'd think about it. Tess and I weren't close by then. We talked maybe once a month, surface level stuff, but I hadn't made any decisions about the wedding party yet. I ended up asking 2 friends from work and Owen's sister. I told my mom I was keeping it small. She was quiet for a moment, then said okay. I sent formal invitations in March. I texted my mom when hers went in the mail. She confirmed she got it. Nothing else. April came, no RSVP from my parents. I texted my mom and asked if she'd had a chance to fill it out. She said she was working on it. I gave it 2 more weeks. I texted again. She said they were planning to come. She just hadn't mailed it yet. I said I needed to give the venue a final count and asked if she could just text me yes or no. She said yes. In early May, Tess called me. Not to talk about the wedding, at least not right away. She called to tell me she and her husband had just bought a house, a 4-bedroom in a suburb of Kansas City, which is where they'd moved a couple years earlier. She was excited, and I was genuinely happy for her. We talked for about 20 minutes. Near the end of the call, she mentioned that our parents were coming down the following weekend to help them move in, flying in on Friday, staying for 10 days. 10 days. Kansas City is a 2-hour drive from Columbus. I didn't say anything for a second. Then I said, "That's great. I'm sure they'll love the new place." We hung up. I sat on my kitchen floor for a while. I didn't tell Owen right away. I made dinner, ate it, washed the dishes, and then I told him. He got very quiet in the way he does when he's choosing his words carefully, and then he said, "Do they know that's 2 hours from here?" I said yes. He said, "Okay." He didn't push it. That night I looked at the calendar. The housewarming weekend was May 9th. Our wedding was June 14th, 5 weeks apart. My parents flew to Kansas City. They stayed 10 days. I know because Tess posted on Facebook every other day photos of the new house, photos at dinner, a photo of my dad helping assemble furniture with his reading glasses on, looking happier than I'd seen him look in years. My mom commented on every post. "So much fun. Love being here." I watched it from my phone in Columbus while I was finalizing the seating chart. They flew home on a Sunday. Our wedding was in 24 days. My mom called me on the following Wednesday. She sounded tired. She said the trip had been a lot and she and my dad were both worn out and she wasn't sure they were going to be able to make it to the wedding. I asked her to say that again. She said the drive was over 2 hours and my dad's knee had been bothering him and she really just didn't think they had it in them right now. I reminded her they had just flown to Kansas City and stayed 10 days. She said that was different because they'd planned it further in advance and had more time to prepare. I asked her what prepare meant for a 2-hour drive. She said she didn't appreciate my tone. I hung up. That was the last conversation I had with either of them before the wedding. I called Owen's mom that night. Greta answered on the second ring, listened to everything I said without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a moment and then said, "We will be there. We will all be there, and Don will walk you in if you want him to." I cried on the phone. I don't cry easily. I cried for about 4 minutes, and then I apologized, and she said, "Don't you dare apologize." And I cried a little more. The week before the wedding, I went through the motions. Final venue walkthrough, rehearsal dinner, flowers. I did not contact my parents. I did not reach out to Tess. At the rehearsal dinner, Don pulled me aside and asked if I'd thought about what I wanted to do about the processional. I told him yes. He straightened his jacket and said, "All right then, I'll be ready." The morning of the wedding, I woke up at 6 and lay in bed for a while looking at the ceiling. I had imagined this day differently for a long time. I think most people do. The version in my head had my dad at the end of that aisle. It didn't anymore. I got dressed, and Owen's sister did my hair, and Don knocked on the door of the bridal suite at 11:15 and said, "Ready when you are, sweetheart," in this quiet, serious voice that made me feel steadier than I had in weeks. He walked me down the aisle. Owen's face when he saw us. I will remember that for the rest of my life. We got married. I danced with Don at the reception instead of my father, and we did a decent job. And at one point he leaned in and said, "Your father is going to regret this forever." And I said, "I know," and we kept dancing. 2 chairs sat empty at my table the entire evening. I had thought about removing them. I didn't. I left them there. 3 weeks after the wedding, on a Thursday morning, my dad showed up at my office building. I work on the 4th floor of an office park in a Columbus suburb. Nothing dramatic about the building. I was in a meeting when the front desk called back and said there was someone here for me. I went down to the lobby and my dad was standing near the door in a jacket I recognized from years ago, holding a folder. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him. He looked like he hadn't slept well. He said, "I need to talk to you about something." I said okay, and I took him to a small conference room near the entrance that we use for outside visitors. He put the folder on the table. Inside was a printout of a financial account, a custodial savings account that had been opened in my name when I was 7 years old. My great-aunt Vera, my dad's aunt, had set it up. I had never known about it. She passed away when I was in college, and I had been told by my parents that she'd left everything to a local historical society. That was apparently not entirely accurate. She had left a portion to the historical society. The rest, about $94,000 after years of growth, had been sitting in this account in my name with my parents listed as custodians until I turned 30. I turned 31 3 months ago. The account had legally passed to my sole control at my 30th birthday. My dad was explaining this to me in the voice of someone who had been thinking about how to have this conversation for a long time. He said they hadn't known quite how to bring it up. He said they wanted to do it the right way. He said they hoped we could talk about how to handle it together as a family. I looked at the folder. I looked at my dad. I said, "How long have you known about this account?" He said he had known since before I went to college. I said, "Did you know about it when you told me you couldn't contribute to my tuition?" He looked at the table. I said, "Did you know about it when Mom called me and asked for $250 a month?" He said it was complicated. I thanked him for bringing the paperwork. I told him I would be in touch. He looked like he wanted to say something else. He didn't. I walked him out, and then I went back upstairs and sat at my desk for about 45 minutes before I could focus on anything else. I called Owen at lunch. I told him everything. He listened, and when I finished, he said, "What do you want to do? Not what should we do? What do you want?" I said I wanted to think for a few days. He said, "Okay, here is what I knew after thinking for a few days. The account was mine. It had been legally mine for the past year. My parents had sat on this information through my college years, through 8 years of me paying down student loan debt, to 46 months of sending them $250 every month, through a wedding they couldn't be bothered to drive 2 hours to attend. They had come to me when the account passed to my control because they wanted to be involved in how it was used. That was the only reason my dad came to my office. Not to apologize, not to explain, to be involved. I contacted the bank directly. The account transfer process took about a week of paperwork, since the custodial term had already expired. The bank said it happened sometimes when custodians delayed notification, and walked me through the steps with no drama. I won't describe the exact mechanics of what I did next, except to say that I moved methodically, and I had Owen's cousin, who was a financial advisor, walk me through each step. We paid off the remainder of my student loans, $19,400. We put down a payment on a house, something Owen and I had been saving toward but hadn't been able to make work yet. We put a portion into a Roth IRA, and I set aside $5,000 for a scholarship fund through my undergraduate university, designated for first-generation college students. I named it after my great-aunt Vera because she set up that account for me, and she deserved the credit. I did not contact my parents during any of this. I did not ask for their input or inform them of my decisions in real time. About 2 weeks after the account transfer, my mom called. I let it go to voicemail. She said she hoped we could talk, that they had some bills coming up and had been counting on sitting down together about the account. I called her back the next morning. I told her the account had been transferred to my control, and I had already made decisions about how to use it. I told her I would not be sending the $250 monthly transfer going forward, effective immediately. I told her I thought it would be a good idea for us to take some time before talking again, because I had a lot of things I was working through and I didn't want to have a conversation I'd regret. My mom said I was being dramatic. She said the account was a family matter. She said they'd been planning to help me access it eventually. I let her finish. Then I said, "You knew about this money the entire time I was asking you for help with college. You knew about it the entire time I was sending you money every month. You knew about it when you told me you couldn't drive 2 hours to my wedding." I said it evenly. I wasn't yelling. I had decided I wasn't going to yell. She didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then she said, "That's not fair." I said, "Okay," and I said goodbye. I have not spoken to my father since the day he came to my office. My mother and I have exchanged a few short texts in the months since, mostly around holidays. Tess knows what happened. Owen's family talks, and some of it filtered through a mutual contact. Tess sent me a text that said I didn't know about the account, and I believe her. I wrote back, "I know," and left it there. We are not close, but I don't hate her. She benefited from a situation she didn't create. Owen and I closed on our house in September. It is a 3-bedroom craftsman in a neighborhood I used to drive through and admire on weekends. White porch, big kitchen windows, a backyard with an apple tree that was there before we were. The first night we slept there, I woke up at 3 in the morning and just lay there listening to the house. The quiet of it. Vera's scholarship went to a 20-year-old from rural Indiana who is studying environmental science. I found out through the university's notification. Her name was in a short paragraph in an alumni newsletter. No last name, just her major and her hometown, and one line she'd written about what the scholarship meant to her. I read it 3 times. My great-aunt Vera died when I was 20 years old, and I barely knew her. She lived in another state. We saw her maybe 5 times in my life. But she thought about me when I was 7. She set something aside and waited. I think about that more than I expected to. Someone who barely knew me looked ahead and said, "This one is going to need a hand someday." And then she quietly made sure I'd have one. I keep her photograph on the bookshelf in our living room now. She's young in it, early 30s, standing in front of a car I can't identify, squinting slightly into the sun. She's not looking at the camera straight on. She's looking just past it, like she's watching something coming from a long way off. I understand that now. I think about Vera a lot, not in a sad way anymore. More like the way you think about a decision someone made quietly, without fanfare, that turned out to matter more than anything loud ever did. She set up that account when I was 7 years old. She never told me. She never needed the credit. She just looked at a little girl and thought, some days she's going to need something solid under her feet. That's the part that gets me, not the money. The seeing. When I look back at everything that happened, the loans I took out alone, the $250 I sent home every month, the 2 chairs no one sat in at my wedding. I used to frame it as a story about what was taken from me. I don't anymore. Because the truth is, nothing that happened to me broke me. It clarified me. Every time I had to figure something out without help, I got a little more precise about who I was and what I was actually capable of. I didn't know that while it was happening. It just felt like being left out. But there's a kind of intelligence that only develops when you stop waiting for someone to hand you the answer. When you have to read the situation yourself, trust your own judgment, and move. My dad came to my office thinking he was going to manage a conversation. He had his folder. He had his pacing. He had probably rehearsed some version of "we were going to tell you eventually." What he didn't account for was that I had spent 31 years learning to read rooms, including his. I knew exactly what that visit was about before he finished his second sentence. And I knew what I was going to do before I walked him out. That's not coldness. I want to be clear about that. What I felt in that conference room wasn't anger exactly. It was something more settled than anger. It was the feeling of finally having all the information and knowing that I had always been okay, that I had built a real life, with real people, on my own terms, and that the account in my name was just confirmation of something I already suspected, that I had been capable of more than anyone in my family gave me credit for, all along. The hardest part wasn't the confrontation. The hardest part was the months after, when I had to sit with the fact that my parents are not villains in some clean story. They're people who made choices, small ones, quiet ones, over many years, that added up to something they probably never intended and definitely never examined. Favoring one child over another rarely starts with malice. It starts with comfort, with ease, with whoever asks for less. And it continues because no one stops it. I stopped it. Owen's dad walked me down the aisle. Owen's mom answered the phone on the second ring. A financial advisor I barely knew helped me think through every step without judgment. Vera left me something before I was old enough to know I'd need it. What I've learned, living on the other side of all of this, is that the people who actually show up, not the ones who are supposed to, but the ones who choose to, are the ones worth building your life around. I keep Vera's photo on the bookshelf. Someday I'll tell my kids about her, not because of the money, because of what she did with her foresight and her quiet, uncelebrated care. That's the kind of person I want to be.